Okay, welcome to week 3 of Tableau for data journalism. Today we're going to talk about data formatting, joins, and blends. Before we get started, I have seen a lot of the comments in assignment 2, and I know that a lot of people didn't get a chance to completely finish their assignment, and that's totally fine. You know, the deadlines are soft deadlines. And just make sure you get everything completed by the end of the course. And as long as you do that, or even, a couple weeks after the course, I will still give you, your little certification that you completed it, as long as all of the assignments are done. So no big rush there. If you still are having trouble understanding parameters or understanding some of the different kinds of dashboard actions, please come to office hours on Wednesday. This week they're going to be Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific time. And if that doesn't work for you, just send me a message and we can try to see if there's, maybe 20 minutes or so that I can give you elsewhere during the week that will work for you. So today we're going to talk about everything about data. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about data reshaping and how to set up your data files. And then we're going to talk about once you bring your data in Tableau and it doesn't look like how you want it, how to get it to look like how you want it. And then we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about joining tables and blending tables. And this is going to be kind of an advanced topic. And I know it might go over your heads a little bit, but it's important to understand because you are going to run into data sets that you need to do this with. And if we have time, we'll go a little bit over calculations, and I'll probably just pepper those in there as we go, but I can't spend too much time on, there could be an entire 5-week course just about calculations. So we're not going to do those too much, but I'll show you at least how to make them some basic ones. Okay, so starting first with data reshaping. I'm going to show you a little spreadsheet I got here. So this is a spreadsheet of data for jobs by industries. You can see we have a bunch of columns here. We have the earnings per job, so that's the average amount that a person gets paid for a job in this industry. And we have years 2001, 2002, 2003, all the way until 2013. And then in the middle here, we have some calculations about percent change from 2010 to 2013, 2001 to 13. And then we have all these other, this says J 2001 to 2002. This is how many jobs were in each industry. So if we were to bring this into Tableau now, what would it look like? Let's take a look. So I just brought this directly into Tableau. You can see what happens. It looks like if we have our industry, we have cities that the industry is for, but then we also can see over down here we have 2001 jobs, 2002 jobs, 2003 jobs, 2004 jobs, all in different columns. Now, what if I wanted to make a line chart that went from 2001 to 2013 and showed how many jobs there were? That's not really something I can do with this. So we have to reshape this data. What I really want is a column of all the years, and then for earnings per job to be one column, and then for jobs to be one column. So I'm going to use the Tableau Reshaper tool. So if you look at my instance of Excel right here, you can see I have a tab for Tableau, and then it has a couple of things in here. And that's the Tableau Reshaper tool. It's totally free to download. All you have to do is basically Google Tableau Reshaper tool. You'll see it's up here, and there's also some blog posts that kind of say how to use it, so that could be useful to you too. So I've already installed the Tableau Reshaper tool. I use it all the time. I was really mad at my boss because he went a whole, I think, 2 months before telling me this existed, where I was pivoting all these by hand. So when you use the Tableau Reshaper tool, basically what it's going to do is take anything you have as columns and turn the heading of the column into one, or anything you have as individual columns. It's going to turn the heading of each column into one column. So you would have a column that's 2001 earnings per job, 2002 earnings per job, 2003 earnings per job, and then take all the numbers below it and cross-tab it out and cross-tab it. So if we were to do this on what we have now, everything up here would be one column. So earnings and all these kind of aggregated calculations and all of these numbers up here. So we don't really want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to reshape these separately and then use joins later on to add all the data back together. So first, I'm going to make it so that I only have the earnings per job here. So I'm going to highlight all of these things in Excel, and I'm just going to paste this. I'm going to copy and paste this in a new sheet. So now we have just the industry, their NAICS number, and the earnings per job. So I don't have any of that other stuff. Now, what I can do, I'm going to get rid of earnings per job in all these titles here. So that it's just a year. Actually, I don't really need to do that. So I'm going to reshape the data. So you can kind of see this little image. It's pretty much telling you what it's doing. It's going to take all of these columns and turn them into rows. And what you do is you select the first piece of data that's supposed to be reshaped. So in this case, this is going to be my labels, and these are the other labels. So this is really the first piece of data. So that's what I'm going to select. I'm going to hit Reshape Data, and this pops up right here. And it's saying select your first data value. So if you don't remember, it kind of has a little picture right here that you're supposed to select. And I'm just going to hit OK. And it'll think about it for a while. And there we go. So now we have all the numbers here. So that's all the earnings. We have every year here. And I'm just going to do a find and replace to get rid of it saying earnings per job. That way we're left with just the number. So now these are just years. So I'm going to rename this column year, and I'm going to rename this column earnings per job. And that's how you use the Tableau Reshaper tool. So now if we wanted to see how earnings have changed over time for each different industry, it's laid out that way. So I'm going to do this one more time because you remember I also had my years were kind of messed up like this. So I'm going to do the same thing. First I'm going to copy these. I'm going to put them in a new sheet. And I'm going to copy all of my jobs numbers. So J2001 through J2013. And I'll paste those here too. So now I have just my industries, my years, and my job numbers. And just like before, I'm going to select the first piece of data. So that's this one, 2001 jobs for crop production. I'm going to hit Reshape Data. I'm going to say OK, so a little pop-up that comes up. It'll think about it for a second. And now I have just 2 columns for those. So I have one for year, and first I'm going to, once again, do a find and replace. I don't want this J in here. I'm just going to replace that. So now we have just the years, and this is going to say year, and this is the number of jobs. So I'm going to rename these sheets. I'm going to rename this one to say earnings per job. I'm going to rename this one to say number of jobs. I'm going to get rid of sheet 1 and sheet 3 because we didn't really need those in the end. Great. And I can get rid of that stuff in here as well. And we only have just kind of the aggregated values in this sheet. So we have everything kind of in separate sheets right now. And when we get to the part about talking about joins, you'll see how we add these back together. So that is how you do data reshaping. Now, the reason you do data reshaping, once again, is because whenever you're making data for Tableau, you kind of want things on the lowest level of aggregation, because you want Tableau to do the aggregation for you. That gives you more kind of room to play in Tableau. So that's why we want to have multiple rows for crop production for each year instead of having it cross-tabbed out. Because doing it cross-tabbed out, we might be able to compare one year to another, kind of, but we'll never be able to see how you've changed over time. You want to use time like a continuous variable. You're going to have to do it like this. Another thing you'll often see cross-tabbed out is having states or provinces across the top. If that happens, you probably are going to want to reshape it because you're going to want states or provinces all in one column. That way you can map them or you can compare them in one chart without having to use measure values. So that's why you would do data reshaping. So let's take a look at this data back in Tableau now. I'm going to close this crappy one that we made so that we can open up the good stuff. So I'm just going to save this. I'm going to save this with a new name. Cool. So I'm opening up Tableau now, and I'm going to connect to my data. It's an Excel file. And I'll navigate over there. My data. This is called industry, wages, the class. Okay. So let's start by just looking at kind of the overall view of things. So you can see here, I have my industries. I have a percent change, percent earnings, job change, all this kind of stuff. I also have NAICS. That is just the number that people are using, that this data set uses it's kind of a unique identifier for industry. So because this is a unique identifier, it shouldn't actually be a measure, despite the fact that it's a number. So I'm going to drag it up here to dimensions. So that's kind of the first thing you do when you're bringing your data into Tableau and trying to figure out what goes where and just making sure your data is clean and ready. That's the first thing you can do. Make sure that everything that's in dimensions is actually a dimension. Make sure that everything that's in measures is actually a measure. So another thing we can talk about is changing the default format of things. So, I have a question here. They asked, why did I do a live connection to the data? Is that the best? No, it's not. I did a live connection because it was faster, and I'm in the middle of teaching, and I want to be able to show you as much as I can really quickly. but you won't be able to publish to Tableau Public unless you have an extract. So making extract is usually a good idea. However, with what we're talking about today about doing blends and joins and kind of setting up your data, you might want to do a live first if you are using Tableau Desktop. Of course, you don't have the option in Tableau Public. But if you're using Tableau Desktop, you might want to do a live connection first just to make sure that your data is actually set up the way you want to, and then make your extracts before you publish. Okay, back to what I was saying. You can see we have some percentages here. So I'm just going to look at my industry and my percent change. So you can see it's in decimals and there's no percentage sign. Well, maybe that's not how I want this to be displayed. So what can I do? If I right click on percent change here, I can go to default properties and to number format. So I can change this to a percentage. It allows me how many decimal points I want. 2 sounds good. Okay. So now these are all the actual percentages. And that's one form of data formatting you might want to do. You can see when we look at number formats, there's a bunch of different ones. If you want to display currency, to always put $ sign. To have, if you want to have 2 decimals or no decimals or anything like that, that's all in there. Okay, I have another question here before I move on. How do you know when to change a measure to a dimension? You kind of just need to understand what your data is in order to do that. Before you can really do anything with your data, you need to know what it is. So looking at my data, I know that NAICS is just an identifier. If it's an identifier, that means I'm not going to want to do math on it. I'm not going to want to sum this up. I'm not going to want the average of this. If I don't want to do those things to it, then it's not a measure. It's a dimension. Measures are only things that you want to do math on, things that you want to aggregate, that you want to average, that you want to sum. So I might want to do things like see the total job change for all of the industries, and that's why these things are all measures. This, despite it being a number, is not a measure because it is a unique identifier and we're not going to do math on it. So that's how you know. Okay, moving on, I'm going to switch gears to a different data set here. Or actually, oh shoot, I'm going to close that. Okay, we can stay here. So another thing you might want to do is change the way things are displayed. So for example, some of these names are really, really long and they make it hard for me to fit everything in one column. So I might want to give them nicknames or smaller names. You can do this by doing aliases. So I right click on industry and I go to default properties and aliases. This is where I can change the way anything is written out. So if I decide that these are a little too wordy, I can just say accounting, etc. Credit intermediation, real estate. I don't have to say the entire thing. I can just say, something that gives you the gist of it. And when you do that, you say, okay, you can see those things were changed up here as well. So that's something you might want to do if data isn't displayed the way you want it to. So that's aliases. So those are just a couple things you can do to clean up the way your data looks in Tableau. All right, before we move on to blends and joins, are there any other questions? Okay, why did I keep the percent change columns instead of reshaping them? So once again, when you're reshaping columns, the reason you do it is because there's something valuable in the column heading. So in this case, for the earnings per job, the column heading was a piece of data, and that piece of data is the year. In these ones, the column heading there's nothing to compare between these columns. There's not really a relationship between 2010 to 2013 earnings percent change and 2001 to 2013. These are all aggregated measures. That's why we don't need to reshape them. Any other questions? Okay, so next we're going to talk about blends and joins. So there are two ways of combining different kinds of data in Tableau. There are blends and there are joins. And the difference is when you're doing a blend, your data sets aren't fully united. They're kind of just referencing each other. When you would do a join, you're combining two different data sets into one data set. So the difference between these and when you would want to use each one of them is if you ever want to do something with the secondary data set. So great, when I'm talking about multiple data sets, I mean that, this is one table and this is another table. So we want to get them all into Tableau together. So in this case, if we did a blend on these things, I couldn't necessarily relate earnings per job to number of jobs in all the ways I want to, because you can't filter on blends, you can't sort on blends. So there are some restrictions to doing a blend, even though they're really nice and easy, and they do have a nice feature that joins don't have, whereas they don't make repeat rows. So when you're doing joins, sometimes rows can get repeated. Before I really get into the difference between these two and how to do them in Tableau and kind of what they look like, I want to talk a little bit more about joins, because they're kind of a complicated topic. Joins are really based on SQL and how SQL tables work. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of joins and just to give you kind of a more abstract knowledge about them so that when we start building them, you'll understand a little more what's going on. I'm going to switch back over to PowerPoint here. So there are three kinds of joins. There's the inner join, the left join, and the right join. And I'm going to tell you the difference between the three. So this is what an inner join is like. Let's say that we have these two tables. We have Mary, Joe, Bob, Sue, and an ID number for each of them. Let's just say they're customers, like regular customers at a restaurant. And then we have, this is maybe the orders for one day, where we have the ID number of the people coming into the restaurant, and then what their order was and how much it cost. Now, when I do an inner join, I'm going to say what the key is, and the key is what is the thing that these two tables have in common. So whenever you do a join, you need to have at least one column that the two tables have in common. In this case, it's ID. So we have ID and ID. So what an inner join will do is look to match up the IDs. And if there is an ID in this table that isn't in this table, it's not going to take it. And if there are IDs in this table that aren't in this table, it's not going to take it. The way an inner join works is that it only takes data that's in both tables. So that means that Mary over here, she didn't order anything this day that we have in this table, so she's not going to be in our final table. And these people must be new people. They're not in our database for customers, so they're not going to be in the final table. So what is the final table going to look like? It's going to look like this. So we have the three IDs that are in both tables, And this is the data from this one, and this is the data from this one. And that's how it's all going to join together in an inner join. The next one we're going to talk about is a left join. In a left join, everything in the left table gets to stay, and we only take things from the right table. So what does this mean? It means that those two IDs that we didn't have data for in this table, they're going to be gone. But what's going to happen for Mary, since she doesn't have an order in this table? We're going to get nulls. So when you do a left join, everything in the left table is preserved, but you get nulls. So if you're doing something like adding data where this stuff is more important than this stuff, that's what you're going to want to do. Lastly, we have right joins. Kind of the same idea, but this time everything in the right is being preserved, which means that poor Mary, she doesn't get to be in our table in the end. And it does mean that we have nulls for all these names that aren't in the left table. So those are the three kinds of joins. Any questions about that? Okay. So now I'm going to show you how to do a join in Tableau. And we're going to join these two tables that we made here, since we have two separate tables, one for earnings per job and one for numbers of jobs. And I really want a table that has all of these things. So the year, the industry, the NAICS number, and the number of jobs, and the earnings per job. I want all of that in one table. Now, if I was a savvy Excel user, I might do something like a VLOOKUP. You guys might be familiar with those. But once you start using Tableau, you don't ever have to do VLOOKUPs anymore. So why do them? They're a pain in the butt. Let's just do it in Tableau. So the first thing I'm going to do is connect to my data. It's in Microsoft Excel, and it is called Industry Wages Class. Okay. So when you open up an Excel workbook that has multiple sheets, all the names of those sheets are going to be the names of your tables. So kind of looking back at our example in PowerPoint here, every sheet in Excel, you can think of it as a different table like this. So we're going to have one table that's our earnings per job data, and we're going to have one table that is our number of jobs data. So you can see we do have that earnings per job, number of jobs. So I'm going to select earnings per job, and that's going to make earnings per job my left table. Whatever you select here is going to become your left table. And then I'm going to select this radio button here for multiple tables. And this means, hey, there's multiple tables in this data set, and I'm going to want to join them. So you can already see, just by the process that we're doing here, that if you are wanting to do a join on multiple tables, they're going to need to both be in the same file, the same Excel file if you're using Excel. If you're using a CSV, they really just need to be in the same folder. But if you're using Excel, you're going to want each table to be a different tab of the same file. So earnings per job, I'm going to click multiple tables, and then I'm going to add a table. Click add table over here. Now what I want to add is number of jobs. So now all these checkboxes are asking you which fields do you want to add from this. Now I don't need to add year or industry or NAICS number because those are already in my data set. Because if I look at the earnings per job, those columns are all there. And these are really just repeats of those same columns. So I don't need to bring in those columns. So I am going to uncheck all of them, and all I want to bring in is number of jobs. And then when I hit join here, you can see it's saying, okay, so it already knows that industry matches industry. So you can see the syntax here is the name of the table, dot the name of the variable. So the industry field in earnings per job is the same as the industry field of number of jobs, and that's true. But I'm also going to want to match on year because there's multiple industries or multiple rows for each industry. The Tableau might get confused and put, 2002 data in 2003, and that wouldn't be good. So we want it to match if B2 here and C2 here match B2 here and C2 here, then it's going to bring in number of jobs. And we can look at our join types here. So those are the three that we mentioned, inner, left, and right. And if we look at our data, earnings per job, there are 3927 rows. Number of jobs, exact same thing. Of course, it's the exact same thing because we have one row for every industry for 2001 through 2015. So these should be exactly the same. We shouldn't have to worry about losing any data or getting any nulls. So I'm just going to leave this as an inner join. And if I hit OK, and it's going to connect live for now. And now you can see we have our year, our industry, and our earnings per job. Once again, it put NAICS as a measure, but we know it's not a measure because we're not going to do math on it. So I'm going to bring it back up here. And now we have one data set that has the industry and the earnings per job and the number of jobs. So I can look at numbers of jobs and I can put earnings per job. And we can see computer systems design makes a little more money than other jobs. Whatever the securities and commodity contracts, apparently that's a hot field. And that's how you combine two different tables into one data set. Now, this is different from a blend, like I told you, because now this is all in one data set. If we wanted to do a blend, one way we could do it is by we've connected to multiple data sets here that you can see, because we also had that original one that had all of the aggregated fields on it. You can see that it's right here. And this is actually a pretty good example of a place that I might want to do a blend, because if I did a join, all of these aggregations would all be in there 12 times, one for every year, 2001, between 2001 and 2013. And that would throw my numbers off. So instead, by doing a blend like this, I get the benefit of having them connected, but they're not repeating things. So the way you do a blend is pretty simple. You just connect to two different data sources, and you can see this one has a blue check mark because that's the data source we're using right now, the earnings per job combined with the number of jobs table. But if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to color this, instead of I'm coloring it on earnings per job right now, I wanted to color it in the change of the number of jobs overall. So what I might do is go to my Nathan final table here, because that table, if we look at the data set again, just to remind you, that one has all of these nice aggregated measures that have already been calculated. So I'm going to go to that one. You can see there's this little chain here and it's red. And that means, hey, I'm pretty sure, Tableau is saying, hey, I'm pretty sure that this field is the same as a field in your primary data source. So that's what I'm going to use to connect these two together. And if you don't want it to connect on that, you can break the chain. But then you can't use the secondary data source. And if it's not automatically finding it, because maybe they're named different things between the two data sources, you can go to Data and Edit Relationship, and you can say what equals what. So in my primary data source, earnings per job, what's kind of the same with my secondary data source. But Tableau is smart, and it figured out that industry is the thing that I'm going to want to join on. So if I wanted to see job change between 2001 and 2013 on color, now I can drag that on here. And there we go. And I can rest assured that because this is a blend, these numbers are accurate and not summated up into this level. Now we can see, department stores, they took a hit. There were a lot of job losses over there. But full service restaurants, it's a very growing business. Any questions about joins or blends? I have a question here. So it says sum, but it's not really a sum. It technically is a sum. It's just only summing one row. So anytime you use any kind of measure data in Tableau, it's going to aggregate it somehow. But right now, the default is to always say sum. But if you have a sum, like if I'm summing up this data, right now it would say that I'm summing up this data by industry. But if we look at the data source, there's only one row per industry. So the sum of job change or crop production is just this cell because there's just one cell. And this is evident when I change it to average. You can see the numbers didn't change at all. That's because it's just one cell that's determining this. The question here is, if you mess up your Excel sheet, go back and change it, how do you easily bring it back in? If you just change anything on your Excel sheet, so let's say I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change the number of crop production. Instead of this 18,000, I'm going to make it like a super high number. And then I'm going to hit save. Now if I go in here and say refresh, all of a sudden you can see how crop production is way darker than everything else because that changed. All you have to do is hit refresh. When you're in Tableau Public, or if you're already working on an extract, you'll have to go to the extract and then refresh. Take that back here. So once again, if I changed it back, and I wanted to refresh this again, and now it's back. Okay, I'm going to show you another example of joins using a data set that isn't an exact one-to-one match. So we're going to talk about my DJ data again. So this is what my DJ data looks like for that radio station example that I used last week. You can see this is for every day, and basically this is every song that they played. You can see there's a very long list. They play a lot of songs in 1 year. We've got about just over almost like 125K of songs here. And the way I did this was I used a scraper tool. And if you guys are interested in learning a little bit about web scraping, I'm going to be doing a webinar on that coming up here in a couple of weeks. So I'll send a link out to that. So I scraped it, and each page that it was scraped from is on here. And when you look at these pages, I'm going to open up one of these. All right, so you'll see that I have two different, well, I have a couple different tabs here, but I'm really only going to make use of two here. So this is the tab that has all of my songs on it. Then I also have this tab here that has the exact date, what show it was, links to the show, a link to the DJ, a comment that the DJ might have made, and a DJ's name. So when you're looking at the website that I scraped this from, this is what you've got. You've got a table of all the songs, and that's what made the first table here. That's from the table of all the songs. But then for each, just once in every page, there's this part up here that says who the DJ is, what the show was, and what the date was. And that's what I have in my second data set. The DJ, the show, they made a comment, what the date was. And you can see, so remember that my first sheet had, almost 125K rows. This one, since it's just one row for every page instead of, 12, this one only has 859. So what kind of join are we going to do with this? We're going to do a left join because this sheet has more data in it than this one. And we want to make sure that everything gets preserved. So we're going to do a left join. So let's go back to Tableau. Let's open up a new thing here. I'm going to connect to my data. Let me make sure this is saved before I move on here. My data is in Microsoft Excel. This is all in my TXT folder. Okay, so my main sheet is going to be Recovered Sheet 1. That was the name of it down here, Recovered Sheet 1. And I'm going to select multiple tables. And I'm going to add a table. And the table I want to add is called DJ's Great. If you look down here, DJ's Great. All right. And you can see, remember before how we have so many different columns that were all in common? In this one, the only column that we have in common is the source page URL. And I don't need duplicates of that, so I'm not going to take that. So I have a question here. The main sheet is the sheet with the most data. That's usually a good way to think of it. It's really just whatever sheet you bring first. If your second sheet has more data in it, you can do a right join, and then that works fine. I like to think of it as whatever has like the main part of the data that I want to use. That's what I use as my first sheet, but it doesn't really matter as long as you do the right kind of join. So in this case, because my first sheet I brought in does have more data than my second sheet, I'm going to want to do a left join, which means that everything in the first table I brought in is preserved. So I hit left join, I hit OK. And if we look at how many number of records we have here, you can see 122, 134. That's how many rows were in my left table. That all looks good. And now we have it so that I can look at data from both sheets at the same time, just as if they're one data set, because they are now one data set. Any questions about that? Okay. So we still have a good 15 minutes left here, so we do have some time to cover a little bit, talk about calculations. I'm going to go back to the other data set here because it kind of lends itself better to calculations. So calculations are things you might want to do on your data, a lot of the things that you can do in Excel, you can actually do in Tableau. The way you make a calculation is by right-clicking anywhere in this. You can do it either in dimensions or in measures, doesn't matter. Saying create calculated field. I click on that, and it brings up this pane here. So I have my name, I have what the formula is, I have any fields that I might have, I have where the parameters are, so you might recognize this from making the case statement. And then I have all my functions down here. And there's a lot of them, so if you need help kind of looking through which ones are which, you can also kind of filter them out here. So we can do mathematical functions like finding the cosine or finding the min or max or raising something to a power of something or do the square root. So all kinds of math things you can do here. There are string calculations. So this is if you're searching for a specific set of characters in a word, maybe you're looking for anything that contains the word, number in it. That's what you would do with a string. We have date calculations, so these can be really useful for figuring out if you are, for example, date differences that I use a lot to kind of add and subtract between days. Finding if you want just the month of a particular date, you can do that. Type conversions, I don't use these very much, but it's basically just a way of saying if you have something that's written as a string and you want it to be a number or vice versa, you can change it using a type conversion. Logical functions are ones that I actually use quite often. And if any of you have any kind of programming experience, you'll recognize how they work. They're if-then statements. So you say, if the first expression is true, then do this. Else, do something else. So, for example, I might do something like, if the number of jobs is less than 200,000, then I'll do a string that says not very many jobs. Else, meaning if it's, this is greater than, I want it to be less than. Else, so meaning if it's greater than 200,000, I'm going to say a lot of jobs. And then I'm going to end. So this would basically make a new dimension with two categories, not very many jobs and a lot of jobs. So that's the kinds of things you can do with a logical function. You've already used a logical function if you've done the assignment 2, which is a case statement, is another example of logical function. So you kind of have the idea of how this whole something then kind of works. Another thing we have, and what I'm going to show you an actual example of, is table calculations. Let's take a look at those. Let's start with a new sheet here, and we're going to work on our earnings per job and number of jobs data. And I'm going to make a simple line chart here by taking year and putting it on column. And then I'm going to put number of jobs on rows. And I'm also going to put earnings. Let's just start with that. So we have this nice line here. Maybe I want to break it out by industry. Maybe not. Well, yeah, let's leave it like that. Now, something I might want to do is instead of just looking at the total number of jobs, what if I wanted to see the percent change from year to year? I can do that with a table calculation by clicking on the pill here and going to quick table calculation. There are a bunch of different things you can do here. One is a running total, so that's adding up all of the jobs as they go. I could do the difference, so how many jobs were lost. So you can see right here, 2009 in employment services, there's a huge loss of jobs. It was already kind of downward trending from 2006, but then there was a big loss of jobs. Or I could maybe look at the percent difference, moves it out a little. The percent of total is going to tell me how much out of all of these things added together we're looking at. So that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense here. That would actually make a little more sense on this one if we wanted to see how many of all of the jobs in the country, how many are these times. So education and hospitals, that accounted for 6.3% of all the jobs in the country. So I'm actually going to keep it as, let's do the difference. And we could even change something like putting number of jobs on color and doing another different table calculations there. So I could do maybe percent difference on color. So that's how you do a table calculation. Pretty simple. You might want to change the way it's computed. So right now it's computing across the table. So it's saying this year to this year to this year. And it's relative to the previous year. So we're looking at, for this line right here, we're looking at the difference between this dot and this dot. But maybe I wanted to do everything and the percent difference to the very first year. So I don't want to know the difference between 2002, 2003, 2003, 2004, 2004, 2005. I want to know the difference between 2003 and 2001, 2004 and 2001, 2005 and 2001. If I wanted to do that, I would change the relative to the first. So now this is how much it's changed since 2001. So we get an idea of the overall trend since 2001. So employment services, not doing great since 2001. Full service restaurants, doing pretty good since 2001. That's how you do a table calc. Any questions about that one? Okay, well, this week's assignment will be a little easier, hopefully, than last week. I'm going to give you a data set that you'll have to use, and it's going to require some reshaping. So you're going to need to download the Tableau Reshaper tool and reshape it. And it's going to require that you join some tables. And once you do that, I don't really care what you do with it. If all you want to do is make like one bar graph and publish it, that's cool. But if you want to make something interesting with it, I encourage you to do that too. And if you haven't finished your assignment 2, you can kind of take this week's easy assignment as an opportunity to finish that up. So, any other questions? So I have a question here, what I want to share in my great color list. Oh yeah, I have a whole file that I can share with you guys if you want to use the custom color palettes I use. So I'll post that on the Reddit. And for anyone who's interested, remember that office hours this week are on Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So come visit me. I'll just be there hanging out. You can drop in at any point between those 4 hours, and I can help you. Okay, so I have a question here. In my first example where I did not too many jobs, etc., would I have had a new measure name pop up? I'm not sure what you mean by that question. So if you could kind of reword that. Oh, okay. So when I was creating the calculated field, if I really did make this field that we'll call how many jobs, and I'm going to say if number of jobs is less than, let's say, 500,000 jobs, then we're going to call this not as much jobs. Else, we're going to call it a whole lot of jobs. And then we're going to say end. So what happens when I finish this is we have a new dimension here. And you know it's a calculated field because it has a little equal sign before it. So now if I wanted to go and maybe I wanted to color this chart instead of by the number of job changes, I just want to see, are there a lot of jobs or not as much jobs? And there we go. We can take the table calc off here. All right, so that's all I got for you guys today. If you have any questions, submit them to Reddit, and I'll see you guys on there. And come join me for office hours, Wednesday, 11 to 3. All right, take care. Have a great week.